Adrian Graves felt a sharp, searing pain in his wrist as the MindNet device activated, and panic surged through him. His neuroband, once a constant reminder of his captivity, now pulsed with the intent to seize control of his mind. Just before everything went dark, a familiar voice whispered urgently in his ear, "Trust no one, Adrian. Remember the plan." The year was 2160. On the distant planet of Novaterra, a sprawling megacity glittered under a synthetic sun, casting its cold, sterile light on millions of inhabitants. This wasn't a place of dreams and hope, it was a meticulously engineered utopia governed by the Unity Collective, UC, a regime that prided itself on absolute control and uniformity. Adrian Graves was one of those millions, a low-level worker in the Ministry of Information. Each day, he donned his drab, gray uniform and melded into the faceless crowd. Like everyone else, he wore a neuroband, a sleek, black device implanted in his wrist that tracked his neural activity. More than just a health monitor, it was the UC's most insidious instrument of control, capable of reading emotions, detecting deviations from prescribed behavior, and even preemptively identifying thoughts deemed subversive. Novaterra was a marvel of human engineering, with towering skyscrapers of glass and steel, interconnected by high-speed transit tubes that crisscrossed the city. The streets below were a symphony of order and precision, patrolled by robotic enforcers and surveillance drones that hovered silently, their lenses always scanning for signs of dissent. The air was filled with the constant hum of machinery and the omnipresent voice of the UC's propaganda broadcasts, blaring from omni screens embedded in every wall, vehicle, and public space. Unity through surveillance proclaimed a holographic billboard, its message shimmering in the air above a busy intersection. Safety and obedience, echoed another, accompanied by an image of Overseer Cassius, the stern, impassive face of the regime. Adrian's life was one of routine and compliance. Each morning, he awoke to the shrill tone of his neuroband's alarm, signaling the start of another day in service to the UC. He ate his nutritionally optimized breakfast in silence, the latest government-mandated updates scrolling across his infopad, a versatile tablet that integrated all personal data and communication. It was both his lifeline and his leash, ensuring he stayed connected to the UC's network at all times. At the Ministry of Information, Adrian's task was both simple and sinister. He altered historical records to fit the UC's ever-evolving narrative. Each document he touched became a piece of propaganda, designed to reinforce the regime's infallibility and erase any trace of dissent. The work was meticulous and unrelenting, but Adrian performed it with the detached efficiency expected of him. Yet, beneath his outward compliance, a flicker of unease had begun to grow. It was a seed planted by a chance encounter months earlier. While sifting through old archives, Adrian had stumbled upon a photograph, a black-and-white image of a bustling marketplace, vibrant with color and life. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, controlled environment of Novaterra. The image was quickly deleted, deemed a relic of the chaotic past, but it had lodged itself in Adrian's mind, a haunting reminder of what had been lost. As Adrian walked to work each day, the streets of Novaterra served as a constant reminder of the UC's omnipotence. Surveillance drones hovered above, their lenses reflecting the gray monotony of the city. Citizens moved with the precision of clockwork, each step, each breath regulated by the unseen hand of the UC. Conversations were stilted and cautious, every word weighed for its potential to betray a thought crime. One day, as Adrian navigated the crowded streets, he felt a sharp twinge in his wrist. The neuroband was more than just a tracker, it was a constant reminder of his subjugation. He glanced at it, the sleek black band embedded with tiny sensors, and suppressed a shudder. It wasn't just a piece of technology, it was a symbol of his captivity. The omni-screens blared their daily dose of propaganda, the voice of Overseer Cassius echoing through the air. We are the Unity Collective. We are the shield that protects humanity from chaos. Obedience is peace. Surveillance is safety. Adrian's gaze flicked to an omni-screen displaying the latest broadcast from the Ministry of Truth. A new directive had been issued, mandating increased vigilance and stricter adherence to the UC's protocols. The punishment for non-compliance was swift and severe: re-education in a cognitive correction facility, a fate that had befallen many who dared to think differently. As he reached the Ministry of Information, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over him. The building was a towering monolith of steel and glass, its facade reflecting the gray sky. Inside, it was a hive of activity, workers moving with robotic precision, their faces blank and expressionless. Adrian's cubicle was a small, sterile space, devoid of personal touches. The walls were lined with screens displaying streams of data, and his desk was cluttered with documents awaiting alteration. He settled into his chair and began his work, his fingers moving swiftly over the keyboard as he edited records to fit the UC's narrative. Hours passed in a blur of monotony. The work was mind-numbing, but Adrian performed it with the same detached efficiency he had mastered over the years. Each document he altered was a small piece of the larger puzzle, a carefully constructed lie designed to maintain the illusion of the UC's infallibility. It was during one of these long, monotonous days that Adrian's life began to change. As he sifted through a batch of old records, his attention was drawn to a name: Lyra Dawes. It was a name he had encountered before, a footnote in the annals of history, but something about it sparked a flicker of recognition. Curiosity piqued, Adrian delved deeper. He accessed the archives and began to piece together a picture of Lyra Dawes, a name that had been meticulously erased from the UC's official records. She had been a prominent figure in the early days of Nova Terra, a leader of the resistance against the UC's rise to power. Her fate was unknown, her legacy a ghostly whisper in the corridors of history. As Adrian read through the records, he felt a strange connection to this forgotten rebel. Her story resonated with the growing disquiet within him, a reminder of the human spirit's resilience in the face of tyranny. He knew that if he was caught, the consequences would be dire, but he couldn't stop himself. He had to know more. The more he learned, the more his unease grew. The UC's control was absolute, but beneath the surface, there were cracks, small, almost imperceptible, but they were there. And as Adrian delved deeper into Lyra's story, he began to see the world around him with new eyes. The seed of rebellion had been planted, and it was beginning to take root. Days turned into weeks, and the seed of rebellion within Adrian continued to grow. His routine at the Ministry of Information became increasingly intolerable as he grappled with the dissonance between the UC's fabricated reality and the fragments of truth he had uncovered. The name Lyra Dawes lingered in his mind, a beacon in the darkness of his existence. One evening, after another long day of altering records, Adrian returned to his sterile apartment. The Omni screen on the wall blared the latest propaganda, but he barely registered the words. His mind was elsewhere, consumed by thoughts of resistance and rebellion. He powered on his infopad, the sleek device lighting up with a soft blue glow. It was his link to the world, his source of information and communication, and tonight, it would become his gateway to a new reality. As he browsed through the daily updates and directives, a peculiar message caught his eye. It was encrypted, a series of numbers and letters that made no sense at first glance. But something about it felt familiar, a code waiting to be cracked. Adrian's heart raced as he worked to decipher the message, his fingers flying over the virtual keyboard. After what felt like hours, the code finally yielded its secret. The message was brief but powerful, an exposé on the UC's manipulation of historical events, complete with evidence that contradicted the official narrative. Adrian's pulse quickened as he read the words, each sentence a hammer blow to the facade of the regime. The message had come from a network called The Veil, a dark web hub for the resistance. It was a place where encrypted messages and information were shared among those who dared to oppose the UC. And it was here that Adrian first encountered the work of Lyra Dawes, the enigmatic hacker who had managed to evade the regime's all-seeing eye. Intrigued and inspired, Adrian began to explore the Veil in earnest. He found more messages, more fragments of truth, and slowly, a picture began to form. The resistance was real, and it was fighting back against the UC's oppressive rule. Each message he read fueled his resolve, and he knew he had to find a way to connect with them. Adrian's search for the resistance led him down a rabbit hole of encrypted files and hidden communications. He learned to navigate the dark web, to cloak his digital footprint, and to decipher the codes that kept the resistance safe. It was a dangerous game, but the more he learned, the more determined he became. One night, as he delved deeper into the veil, Adrian received a direct message. It was short and to the point, an invitation to a physical meeting. The location was a nondescript building on the outskirts of Novaterra, far from the prying eyes of the surveillance drones. The message was signed with a single word, Lyra. Adrian knew the risks, but he couldn't ignore the opportunity. The chance to meet Lyra Dawes in person, to join the resistance and fight back against the UC, was too compelling to pass up. He prepared carefully, ensuring his neuroband's data would remain innocuous and that his absence would go unnoticed. The night of the meeting, Adrian slipped through the shadows of Novaterra, avoiding the gaze of the drones and the patrols of robotic enforcers. The city felt alive with tension, every corner a potential trap, every shadow a possible threat. But his determination drove him forward, and soon he found himself standing before the building mentioned in the message. The door was unmarked, a simple metal panel that slid open as he approached. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. He was greeted by a group of people who, like him, wore expressions of cautious hope. They led him through a series of corridors to a dimly lit room where Lyra Dawes awaited. Lyra was nothing like Adrian had imagined. She was small and slight, with dark hair cut short and eyes that seemed to pierce through to his soul. She exuded an air of quiet confidence, her presence both reassuring and intimidating. As she introduced herself, Adrian felt a mix of awe and relief. He had finally found the resistance, and he was ready to join their fight. Lyra wasted no time. She explained the mission of the Free Minds, the name of their underground resistance group, and their ongoing efforts to disrupt the UC's control. She spoke of the dangers they faced, the sacrifices they had made, and the hope that kept them going. Adrian listened intently, absorbing every word. The meeting was brief but impactful. Lyra provided Adrian with the tools he would need to contribute to their cause: encrypted communication devices, a crash course in hacking and cyber warfare, and a network of safe houses scattered throughout the city. She warned him of the risks, but her words only strengthened his resolve. As Adrian left the building that night, he felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He was no longer just a cog in the UC's machine. He was part of something bigger, a movement dedicated to reclaiming their city and their lives. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time, Adrian felt truly alive. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Adrian's life took on a new rhythm as he balanced his duties at the Ministry of Information with his clandestine work for the Free Minds. Each day, he meticulously edited historical records, erasing inconvenient truths and fabricating stories that glorified the UC. But each night, he dove into the dark web, connecting with Lyra and the other members of the resistance, planning their next moves. Adrian's transformation was not without cost. The constant deception weighed heavily on him, and the fear of discovery was a constant presence. But the thrill of rebellion, the sense of fighting for a greater cause, kept him going. He learned to navigate the dangerous world of espionage, to think on his feet, and to trust his instincts. His first major task for the Free Minds was to hack into the UC's mainframe and extract data on their surveillance operations. It was a high-stakes mission, fraught with risks, but Adrian approached it with determination and focus. Lyra provided guidance, her calm, confident voice a steadying presence in the chaos. The night of the mission, Adrian sat in his dimly lit apartment, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he breached the UC's defenses. The data was heavily encrypted, but he had learned from the best. Hours passed in a blur of code and commands, but finally, he broke through. The information he uncovered was staggering. Detailed plans for the expansion of the surveillance network, including the implementation of a new, more invasive technology called MindNet. MindNet was a neural implant designed to integrate directly with the neuroband, giving the UC unprecedented control over citizens' thoughts and memories. It was a chilling realization, a glimpse into the future of totalitarian control. Adrian knew they had to act quickly to prevent its implementation. Armed with this new information, Adrian and Lyra devised a plan to sabotage the MindNet project. It would require precise coordination and nerves of steel, but they were determined to succeed. The fate of Nova Terra hung in the balance, and they could not afford to fail. As they prepared for the mission, Adrian found himself growing closer to Lyra. Despite the danger and uncertainty, there was a bond forming between them, a shared sense of purpose and determination. Lyra's strength and resilience inspired Adrian, and he found himself relying on her more and more. The night of the raid, they gathered at a hidden safe house on the outskirts of the city. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with anticipation. They reviewed the plan one last time, checking their equipment and ensuring they were ready for any contingency. Adrian felt a mix of fear and excitement, the weight of their mission pressing down on him. The central control nexus was a fortress, its defenses formidable. But the free minds were prepared. They moved swiftly and silently, bypassing security measures and infiltrating the facility. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest as they made their way through the labyrinthine corridors, every step bringing them closer to their goal. As they reached the central hub, disaster struck. A member of their team, someone they had trusted, betrayed them. The alarm sounded, and suddenly, they were surrounded by UC forces. Adrian and Lyra were captured, their mission seemingly doomed. Thrown into a sterile, cold cell, their hands bound and their neurobands locked in a state of high surveillance, Adrian and Lyra faced the harsh reality of their situation. The betrayal stung deeply, a harsh reminder of the dangers they faced. As they sat in the dim light, the silence between them was heavy with unspoken fears and regrets. Hours later, Overseer Cassius himself entered the cell. His presence was imposing, his expression a mask of controlled fury. He spoke with a cold, calculated voice, outlining their crimes and the futility of their resistance. He revealed the full extent of the UC's plans for MindNet, describing it as the ultimate tool for maintaining order and control. But Lyra was not defeated. With a calm defiance, she revealed that she had planted a quantum virus in the UC's system, a contingency plan designed to activate in the event of their capture. As Cassius ranted about the inevitability of their control, the virus triggered, causing the surveillance network to collapse momentarily. The facility was thrown into chaos, alarms blaring and systems malfunctioning. Seizing the opportunity, Adrian and Lyra managed to overpower their guards and escape. The central control nexus was in disarray, and the confusion allowed them to slip away undetected. They fled into the night, their hearts racing with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Their escape was not without consequences. The UC's grip on the city tightened, and the hunt for the rebels intensified. But their actions had sparked something in the hearts of the citizens of Nova Terra. The cracks in the regime's facade were growing, and whispers of dissent spread like wildfire. Adrian and Lyra continued their fight from the shadows, using the chaos they had created to rally more support for the free minds. They knew the road ahead was long and dangerous, but they were undeterred. The spark of rebellion had been ignited, and they were determined to fan it into a flame that would consume the tyranny of the UC. As they moved from safe house to safe house, planning their next move, Adrian felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just a cog in the UC's machine. He was a warrior, fighting for a future free from the shackles of surveillance and control. The bond between him and Lyra grew stronger, their shared struggle forging a connection that transcended the chaos around them. In the shadows of Nova Terra, the fight for freedom raged on. The UC's control was formidable, but the human spirit was resilient. Adrian and Lyra knew that the battle would be long and difficult, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would reclaim their city and their lives, one step at a time. The Central Control Nexus raid had been a success, but it came at a high cost. The UC's surveillance state was on high alert, and the city of Nova Terra buzzed with tension. Adrian and Lyra, now fugitives, continued their resistance from the shadows, moving between safe houses and rallying more support for the free minds. Adrian's world had transformed completely. By day, he remained the compliant worker at the Ministry of Information, meticulously altering records to fit the UC's narrative. By night, he was a key player in the resistance, working tirelessly to undermine the regime's control. The double life was exhausting, but the purpose it brought fueled his resolve. One evening, after another grueling day at the ministry, Adrian met Lyra in a hidden basement beneath an abandoned warehouse. The dim light flickered over stacks of old equipment and faded posters from a bygone era. Lyra was hunched over a table, examining blueprints and surveillance footage. "We need to disrupt their communications next," Lyra said, not looking up as Adrian approached. "If we can interfere with their ability to coordinate, we can buy ourselves more time to gather resources and support." Adrian nodded, his mind already racing through the possibilities. "What's the plan?" Lyra laid out the details. The UC's central communication hub was located in one of the most fortified buildings in Nova Terra. The operation would require precision, stealth, and impeccable timing. Any mistake could mean capture, or worse. "We'll need a diversion," Lyra continued. "Something big enough to draw their attention away from the hub." Adrian's thoughts flashed to his contacts within the ministry. "I think I can arrange that," he said, an idea forming. "There's a high-profile event scheduled at the Ministry of Truth next week. I can plant false information about a major attack on the event. It should divert enough security forces away from the hub." Lyra looked at him, a mixture of admiration and concern in her eyes. "That's risky, Adrian. If they catch on—" "They won't," Adrian interrupted, determination in his voice. "We'll make it work." Over the next few days, Adrian carefully crafted the false intelligence, planting it in the right places to ensure it reached the UC security forces. The day of the event arrived, and as anticipated, the Ministry of Truth was swarming with enforcers and surveillance drones. Under the cover of the chaos, Adrian, Lyra, and a small team of resistance fighters made their way to the communication hub. The building was a fortress, its exterior bristling with sensors and automated defenses. But the free minds were prepared. They moved with precision, disabling security systems and bypassing patrols. Inside the hub, they encountered minimal resistance. The UC's forces were preoccupied with the supposed threat at the Ministry of Truth. Adrian and Lyra quickly got to work, planting devices that would disrupt the communication network and send the UC's coordination into disarray. Just as they were about to finish, an alarm blared. A hidden sensor had detected their presence. Enforcers swarmed the building, and the air filled with the sound of approaching footsteps and the clatter of weapons. "We need more time," Lyra shouted over the din. Adrian's mind raced. He knew they couldn't hold off the enforcers for long. "Go, I'll finish this," he said, pushing Lyra towards the exit. Lyra hesitated, her eyes filled with worry.
Adrián, no.
"Go," he insisted. "I'll catch up." With a reluctant nod, Lyra and the others retreated, leaving Adrian alone in the hub. He worked quickly, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. As the enforcers closed in, he planted the final device and activated the disruption. The communication network faltered, and the hub was thrown into chaos. Adrian made his escape, darting through the labyrinthine corridors as alarms blared around him. He reached the exit just as the enforcers breached the control room, their shouts echoing behind him. Reuniting with Lyra and the others at a safe house, Adrian felt a surge of relief. The mission had been a success, and the UC's communication network was in disarray. But the victory was bittersweet, a reminder of the constant danger they faced. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. The disruption of the communication network had given the free minds a crucial advantage. They used the chaos to rally more support, organize resources, and strike at vulnerable points in the UC's infrastructure. Adrian and Lyra continued to grow closer, their shared struggle forging a bond that transcended the chaos around them. They spent long nights planning their next moves, their conversations filled with hope and determination. One evening, as they sat in a dimly lit safe house, Lyra turned to Adrian, her eyes serious. "We've made progress, but we need to think bigger. We need to take out Overseer Cassius." Adrian's heart skipped a beat. Cassius was the face of the regime, the embodiment of its control and oppression. "How do we even get close to him?" he asked. Lyra smiled, a glint of determination in her eyes. "I've been working on that. We have a plan." As she outlined the details, Adrian felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The plan was bold, dangerous, and required perfect execution. But if they succeeded, it could change everything. In the shadows of Nova Terra, the fight for freedom raged on. Adrian and Lyra knew that the road ahead was long and dangerous, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would reclaim their city and their lives, one step at a time. The plan to take out Overseer Cassius was as audacious as it was dangerous. Adrian and Lyra knew it was a high-risk operation, but the potential reward, the dismantling of the UC's leadership and a significant blow to their control, was too great to pass up. The plan centered around the Unity Collective's annual gala, an event where the regime's elite gathered to celebrate their control over Nova Terra. It was one of the few times Cassius would be exposed, away from the fortified walls of the central control nexus. Adrian and Lyra spent days preparing. They mapped out the gala's location, identified security weaknesses, and coordinated with other members of the Free Minds. Their goal was to infiltrate the event, eliminate Cassius, and escape before the UC could respond. The night of the gala, Adrian and Lyra dressed in the finest attire they could muster from their limited resources. Disguised as gala attendees, they blended into the crowd of the elite, their faces masked by smiles that hid their true intentions. The gala was held in the Grand Hall, a vast and opulent space adorned with crystal chandeliers and lavish decorations. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and the murmur of polite conversation. Adrian and Lyra moved through the crowd, their eyes scanning for Cassius. They found him near the center of the room, surrounded by high-ranking officials and sycophants. Cassius, tall and imposing, held court with an air of unassailable authority. His presence exuded control and dominance, a stark reminder of the regime's iron grip. Adrian and Lyra exchanged a glance, the silent communication between them clear. It was time. Adrian slipped away to disable the security systems, while Lyra approached Cassius, her demeanor calm and confident. "Overseer Cassius," she said, her voice steady. "A pleasure to finally meet you in person." Cassius turned, his eyes narrowing slightly as he regarded her. "And you are?" "Lydia Darrow," Lyra lied smoothly, extending her hand. "I've been eager to discuss some ideas for enhancing our surveillance protocols." Cassius smiled, a predatory expression. "I'm always interested in innovative ideas. Let's talk." As they engaged in conversation, Adrian worked quickly, his fingers flying over the control panel hidden behind a decorative screen. He bypassed the security protocols, temporarily disabling the surveillance cameras and alarm systems. With the system compromised, he signaled to Lyra. "Excuse me, Overseer," Lyra said, glancing at her infopad. "I need to step away for a moment. Perhaps we can continue this discussion in a more private setting." Cassius nodded, his curiosity piqued. "Of course, Lydia. Lead the way." Lyra led Cassius to a secluded corridor away from the main hall. Adrian joined them, his presence concealed in the shadows. As Cassius stepped into the corridor, Lyra turned to face him, her expression hardening. "This ends tonight, Cassius," she said, her voice cold and determined. Before Cassius could react, Adrian emerged from the shadows, a weapon in his hand. For Novaterra, he said quietly, aiming at Cassius. Cassius's eyes widened in realization, but it was too late. Adrian pulled the trigger, and Cassius fell to the ground, a look of shock and rage on his face. The overseer of the Unity Collective was dead. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the corridor, and the gala erupted into chaos. Attendees screamed and scattered, the UC security forces rushing to respond. Adrian and Lyra knew they had only moments to escape. They moved swiftly, blending into the panicked crowd and making their way to the exit. The temporary disablement of the security systems bought them precious time, but they had to act quickly. As they reached the entrance, they saw a group of enforcers blocking their path. "We need another way out," Adrian said urgently, scanning the area for an escape route. Lyra pointed to a side door leading to the service corridors. "This way." They sprinted down the narrow passageways, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind them. The service corridors were a maze, but Lyra navigated them with practiced ease. They emerged into an alley behind the grand hall, the cool night air a stark contrast to the heat of the chase. A vehicle awaited them, driven by a trusted member of the Free Minds. Adrian and Lyra jumped in, and the car sped away, leaving the chaos of the gala behind. As they drove through the darkened streets of Novaterra, Adrian felt a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. They had done it, they had eliminated Cassius. But the repercussions of their actions were just beginning to unfold. The UC would retaliate, their grip tightening as they sought to reassert control. But for now, Adrian and Lyra had struck a significant blow, a spark of hope in the oppressive darkness. Back at the safe house, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of celebration and caution. The members of the Free Minds congratulated Adrian and Lyra, their faces alight with hope. But they knew the road ahead was still perilous. "We did it," Lyra said, her voice filled with a quiet triumph. "But we can't let our guard down. This is just the beginning." Adrian nodded, his resolve stronger than ever. "We're ready for whatever comes next." In the shadows of Novaterra, the fight for freedom raged on. The UC's control was formidable, but the human spirit was resilient. Adrian and Lyra knew that the battle would be long and difficult, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would reclaim their city and their lives, one step at a time. The death of Overseer Cassius sent shockwaves through Novaterra. The Unity Collective responded with swift and brutal measures, tightening their grip on the city. Curfews were imposed, surveillance was intensified, and enforcers patrolled the streets in greater numbers. The citizens of Novaterra lived in a state of constant fear, the oppressive atmosphere thicker than ever. Adrian and Lyra, now high-profile targets, were forced deeper underground. The Free Minds continued their operations, but the increased scrutiny made every move more dangerous. Despite the risks, the resistance was emboldened by their success. The death of Cassius had proven that the UC was not invincible, and whispers of rebellion spread throughout the city. One evening, in the dimly lit safe house, Lyra gathered the core members of the Free Minds. The room was filled with tension and anticipation as she addressed them. "Our victory was significant," she began, "but the UC's retaliation has made it clear that they're more determined than ever to crush us. We need to adapt, to be smarter and more strategic in our actions." Adrian stood beside her, his expression resolute. "We've struck a blow, but we need to be careful. The UC is tightening its noose, and we can't afford to make mistakes." One of the members, a young hacker named Jax, spoke up. "I've been monitoring the UC's communications. They're planning something big, something called Operation Purge. It looks like they're going to target suspected resistance cells across the city." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "We need to warn our allies and find a way to disrupt this operation. Jax, can you get us more details?" Jax nodded. "I'll need some time, but I'll find a way." As the meeting continued, they formulated a plan to counter Operation Purge. The Free Minds would use their network of contacts to warn other resistance groups and coordinate a citywide effort to disrupt the UC's plans. Days turned into nights as Adrian, Lyra, and their team worked tirelessly to gather information and prepare for the coming storm. The tension was palpable, but so was the sense of purpose. They were fighting not just for their survival, but for the future of Nova Terra. One night, as Adrian and Lyra worked late into the evening, a sudden noise startled them. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors of the safe house, growing louder with each passing second. Adrian's heart raced as he glanced at Lyra, who was already reaching for her weapon. The door burst open, and a figure stumbled into the room. It was a young woman, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "They're coming," she gasped. "The enforcers, they found us." Without hesitation, Adrian and Lyra sprang into action. "We need to move, now," Lyra shouted, rallying the others. The safe house, once a sanctuary, was now a trap. They gathered their essential equipment and files, abandoning everything else. The group moved swiftly and silently through the underground tunnels, their hearts pounding as the sound of pursuit grew closer. As they emerged into the night, they scattered into the shadows of Nova Terra. Adrian and Lyra led a small group towards a secondary safe house, a location known only to the highest-ranking members of the Free Minds. The streets were eerily quiet, the oppressive silence broken only by the distant hum of surveillance drones. They reached the safe house, a nondescript building tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. Inside, they found temporary refuge, but the reality of their situation was grim. The UC was closing in, and their options were dwindling. "We can't keep running forever," Adrian said, his voice heavy with frustration. "We need to strike back, to show them that we're not just prey." Lyra nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We will. But we need to be smart about it. Jax, what have you found about Operation Purge?" Jax, who had been working tirelessly on his laptop, looked up. "It's worse than we thought. They're planning to round up anyone with suspected ties to the resistance and send them to re-education camps. We need to act fast." The group fell into a tense silence as they absorbed the news. The UC's crackdown was more severe than they had anticipated, and the stakes had never been higher. "We'll need to coordinate with other resistance cells," Lyra said finally. "If we can disrupt their operations and protect our people, we might be able to turn the tide." Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. "We're in this together, Lyra. We'll find a way." In the days that followed, the Free Minds launched a series of coordinated strikes against the UC's infrastructure. They sabotaged communication networks, disrupted supply lines, and launched guerrilla attacks on key installations. The resistance was relentless, their actions sending a clear message: they would not be broken. Despite the increased danger, Adrian and Lyra continued to lead from the front. Their bond grew stronger, forged in the crucible of their shared struggle. They found solace in each other's presence, their determination fueled by the hope that they could make a difference. One night, as they planned their next move, Lyra turned to Adrian with a solemn expression. "We need to take out the re-education camps. If we can free those who have been captured, we'll not only save lives, but also gain more allies." Adrian nodded, his resolve unwavering. "Let's do it." The plan was risky, but they had no other choice. The Free Minds prepared for their most daring mission yet, a simultaneous assault on the re-education camps scattered across Nova Terra. As the night of the operation approached, the tension among the resistance fighters was palpable. They knew the risks, but they were driven by a fierce determination to fight for their freedom. The assault began with precision and coordination. Resistance fighters infiltrated the camps, disabling security systems and freeing the captives. The air was filled with the sounds of battle, but the resistance fighters moved with purpose, their actions driven by a sense of justice and defiance. Adrian and Lyra led the charge, their hearts pounding as they fought their way through the camps. The captives, once broken and defeated, found new hope in the presence of their liberators. The tide was turning, and the UC's control was beginning to crack. As the dawn broke over Nova Terra, the re-education camps lay in ruins. The resistance had struck a significant blow, and the freed captives joined their ranks, their spirits rekindled by the promise of freedom. In the aftermath of the assault, Adrian and Lyra stood together, their faces marked by exhaustion and determination. They knew the fight was far from over, but they had taken a crucial step towards reclaiming their city. "We did it," Lyra said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and resolve. "But there's still a long way to go." Adrian nodded, his eyes reflecting the same determination. "We'll keep fighting. Together." In the shadows of Nova Terra, the fight for freedom raged on. The UC's control was formidable, but the human spirit was resilient. Adrian and Lyra knew that the battle would be long and difficult, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would reclaim their city and their lives, one step at a time. The successful assault on the re-education camps had given the free minds a much-needed boost in morale and numbers. The newly liberated captives, now resistance fighters, brought fresh perspectives and skills to the cause. The UC, though rattled by the attacks, responded with even greater brutality, tightening their grip on Nova Terra and increasing surveillance and patrols. Despite the dangers, whispers of rebellion grew louder. Ordinary citizens, inspired by the actions of the free minds, began to resist in small but significant ways. Graffiti proclaiming freedom and "down with the UC" appeared overnight on the gray walls of the city, and acts of civil disobedience became more frequent. The spark of revolution had been ignited, and it was spreading. Adrian and Lyra, now the de facto leaders of the resistance, worked tirelessly to coordinate their efforts. Their bond had deepened, forged in the fires of their shared struggle. They spent long nights planning, their conversations filled with hope and determination. One evening, as they reviewed intelligence reports in a hidden bunker, Lyra looked up from her screen, her expression serious. "We need to strike at the heart of the UC. We've disrupted their operations, but we need a decisive blow, something that will show the people of Nova Terra that the UC is not invincible." Adrian nodded, his mind racing. "What do you have in mind?" Lyra pulled up a schematic of the Central Control Nexus, the fortress-like building that housed the UC's leadership and central command. "If we can infiltrate the Nexus and disable their central AI, we can cripple their surveillance network and disrupt their ability to coordinate. It will be a massive blow to their control." Adrian studied the schematic, understanding the enormity of the task. The Nexus was the most heavily fortified building in the city, bristling with defenses and surrounded by enforcers. "It won't be easy," he said, "but it's possible. We'll need a distraction, something big enough to draw their forces away." A plan began to take shape. They would orchestrate a citywide uprising, coordinating with other resistance cells to launch simultaneous attacks on key UC facilities. The chaos would force the UC to divert their forces, giving Adrian, Lyra, and a small team the chance to infiltrate the Nexus. The preparations were intense. Messages were sent through encrypted channels, and resistance fighters across the city prepared for the largest coordinated strike yet. The tension was palpable, but so was the sense of purpose. This was their moment, the culmination of all their efforts. The night of the uprising, the city of Nova Terra seemed to hold its breath. As the clock struck midnight, the city erupted in chaos. Explosions rocked UC facilities, and firefights broke out in the streets. Surveillance drones were shot down, and enforcers found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the rebellion. Amidst the chaos, Adrian, Lyra, and their elite team moved towards the Central Control Nexus. Disguised as UC operatives, they slipped through the outer defenses and entered the building. The corridors were eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the turmoil outside. Using the schematics, they navigated their way to the central AI chamber. The heart of the UC surveillance network, it was protected by the most advanced security systems. Adrian worked quickly, bypassing the security protocols, while Lyra and the others stood guard. As they reached the final security barrier, an alarm sounded. They had been detected. The team sprang into action, defending their position as Adrian continued to work. The sound of approaching enforcers grew louder, and the tension in the room was palpable. "We're running out of time," Lyra shouted over the din. Adrian's hands flew over the controls. Just a few more seconds. The door to the AI chamber slid open, and they rushed inside. The room was filled with servers and control panels, the air humming with energy. Adrian moved to the central terminal and began the shutdown sequence. Outside, the enforcers were closing in. Lyra and the team held their ground, their determination unwavering. The fate of Nova Terra hung in the balance. "Got it!" Adrian exclaimed as the AI began to power down. The lights flickered, and the hum of machinery slowed to a halt. The sudden silence was broken by the sound of the enforcers breaching the chamber. A fierce battle ensued, but the resistance fighters fought with the ferocity of those with nothing left to lose. With the AI disabled, the UC's coordination faltered. The enforcers, now operating without central command, were thrown into disarray. Adrian, Lyra, and the remaining team members used the confusion to their advantage, fighting their way out of the Nexus. As they emerged into the chaos of the city, the effects of their actions became clear. The UC's control was crumbling. Resistance fighters, emboldened by the success of the mission, pushed back against the enforcers. The citizens of Nova Terra, inspired by the rebellion, took to the streets in a show of solidarity. Adrian and Lyra regrouped with the other resistance leaders in a hidden location. The atmosphere was electric with hope and determination. They had dealt a significant blow to the UC, but the fight was far from over. "We've shown them that we can fight back," Lyra said, her voice filled with resolve. "But we need to keep the pressure on. We need to liberate this city, one step at a time." Adrian nodded, his eyes reflecting the same determination. "We've come this far. We won't stop now." In the shadows of Nova Terra, the fight for freedom raged on. The UC's control was formidable, but the human spirit was resilient. Adrian, Lyra, and the free minds were ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would reclaim their city and their lives, one step at a time. The aftermath of the Central Control Nexus assault left the Unity Collective in disarray. The UC's leadership, scrambling to regain control, responded with increased brutality. Curfews were tightened, patrols doubled, and surveillance was more pervasive than ever. Yet, despite the oppressive measures, the resistance continued to grow. The spark of rebellion ignited by the free minds was spreading, and the tide was slowly turning. Adrian and Lyra, now prominent figures in the resistance, knew they needed to capitalize on the momentum. As they met with their core team in a hidden bunker, the atmosphere was a mix of determination and tension. "We need to keep pushing," Lyra said, her eyes scanning the faces of the gathered resistance fighters. "Our next target is crucial, the UC's main supply depot. If we can take control of it, we'll not only cripple their operations, but also gain access to essential resources." Adrian nodded, adding, "The depot is heavily fortified, but we have an advantage. Our contact within the UC has provided us with detailed schematics and security protocols. We'll need to move quickly and strike hard." The plan was set in motion. Over the next few days, resistance cells across Nova Terra prepared for the assault. Adrian and Lyra coordinated the operation, ensuring every detail was meticulously planned. The success of this mission was critical to maintaining their momentum. The night of the assault, the resistance fighters gathered in the shadows, their faces determined and resolute. The supply depot loomed ahead, a stark reminder of the UC's control over the city's lifeblood. Adrian, Lyra, and their team moved with precision, bypassing security measures and neutralizing guards with silent efficiency. Inside the depot, the scale of their task became clear. Crates of supplies, weapons, and essential equipment filled the vast warehouse. The team split into groups, each with a specific objective. Adrian led the effort to secure the main control room, while Lyra oversaw the loading of supplies onto trucks for transport to resistance-safe houses. As they moved through the depot, the sound of gunfire and shouts echoed through the corridors. The UC forces, though caught off guard, quickly mounted a defense. The resistance fighters pressed on, their determination unshaken. In the control room, Adrian worked quickly to disable the security systems and open the main gates. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, and he knew time was running out. Just as he finished, a group of UC enforcers burst into the room. "Get down!" Adrian shouted, diving for cover. The room erupted into chaos as gunfire filled the air. The resistance fighters held their ground, using the control consoles and crates for cover. Amid the chaos, Adrian spotted a familiar face, a high-ranking UC officer, the one who had betrayed them during the Nexus raid. Rage and determination fueled Adrian's actions. He moved with precision, taking down enforcers with calculated shots. As the firefight continued, the officer advanced, his eyes locked on Adrian. "This ends now," the officer snarled, raising his weapon. Adrian's mind raced. He needed to disable the officer before more reinforcements arrived. With a swift motion, he threw a smoke grenade, filling the room with a thick, blinding haze. Using the cover, Adrian maneuvered behind the officer, taking him down with a single, well-placed strike. With the control room secure, Adrian rejoined Lyra and the others in the main warehouse. The operation was progressing, but the sound of approaching reinforcements meant they needed to move quickly. "Load everything you can and fall back," Lyra shouted, directing the fighters. The trucks, now filled with supplies, roared to life. The resistance fighters piled in, and the convoy sped away, leaving the chaos of the depot behind. As they returned to their safe house, the magnitude of their victory sank in. The operation had been a success, dealing a significant blow to the UC and bolstering the resistance's resources. The atmosphere was electric with hope and determination. "We did it," Lyra said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and triumph. "This will give us the strength we need to keep fighting." Adrian nodded, his eyes reflecting the same resolve. "This is just the beginning. We need to stay vigilant and keep pushing forward." In the days that followed, the UC's leadership grew increasingly fractured. Tensions within the regime's ranks became apparent, and the once unified front began to show cracks. The resistance, now better equipped and more determined than ever, continued to press their advantage. Adrian and Lyra, though exhausted, remained steadfast. They knew the road ahead was still fraught with danger, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. The spark of revolution had become a flame, and it was spreading across Nova Terra. In the shadows of the city, the fight for freedom raged on. The UC's control was formidable, but the human spirit was resilient. Adrian, Lyra, and the free minds were ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would reclaim their city and their lives, one step at a time. The successful assault on the supply depot was a turning point for the free minds. The UC's response, though brutal, revealed cracks in their seemingly unbreakable control. Tensions within the regime's leadership were growing, and whispers of dissent had even begun to reach the highest echelons of power. Adrian and Lyra knew that to sustain their momentum, they needed more than just resources, they needed inside information. They needed an ally within the UC itself. Their best chance lay in a high-ranking official who had shown signs of disillusionment with the regime's increasingly oppressive measures. One evening, as Adrian and Lyra reviewed intelligence reports in their hidden bunker, a message came through their encrypted network. It was from their contact within the UC, a high-ranking officer named Marcus Vallon, who had become increasingly sympathetic to their cause. "Adrian, Lyra," the message read, "I have critical information regarding the UC's next moves. Meet me at the old maintenance tunnels beneath Sector 7. Midnight." Come alone. The message was brief but clear. Adrian and Lyra exchanged a glance, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on them. This could be our chance, Lyra said, her voice steady. If Marcus is telling the truth, we might gain the upper hand. Adrian nodded. We need to be cautious. It could also be a trap. That night, under the cover of darkness, Adrian and Lyra made their way to the abandoned maintenance tunnels. The air was thick with tension, and the silence was only broken by the distant hum of the city above. They moved cautiously, every sense on high alert. As they reached the rendezvous point, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Marcus Vallon, his face drawn with worry and determination. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said, his voice low. "We don't have much time. The UC is planning a massive crackdown, Operation Purge. They aim to eliminate all suspected resistance members in one coordinated strike." Adrian's heart sank. "How much time do we have?" 3 days, Marcus replied. "They're mobilizing enforcers and preparing to sweep through the city. They won't stop until they've rooted out every last one of you." Lyra's eyes hardened. "We need to warn the others and prepare our defenses. But we also need to strike back. We can't let them crush the hope we've built." Marcus nodded. "I can provide you with the locations of their command centers and weak points in their network. But you need to act fast. If they realize I've betrayed them, it will be over for all of us." Adrian and Lyra exchanged a determined glance. "We'll use this information to our advantage," Adrian said. "Thank you, Marcus. You're risking everything for us." Marcus's expression was resolute. "I believe in what you're fighting for. Nova Terra deserves better than the UC's tyranny. Now go, time is running out." With Marcus's information, Adrian and Lyra returned to their base and quickly mobilized the free minds. The plan was twofold: warn the other resistance cells about the impending crackdown and launch a series of preemptive strikes on the UC's command centers to disrupt Operation Purge. The following days were a blur of activity. Messages were sent through encrypted channels, and resistance fighters across the city prepared for the onslaught. Adrian and Lyra led the efforts, coordinating attacks and ensuring every detail was meticulously planned. The night before the crackdown, the resistance struck. Explosions rocked the UC's command centers, and firefights erupted across Nova Terra. The coordinated strikes threw the UC's plans into disarray, buying the resistance precious time to fortify their positions and evacuate vulnerable members. Adrian and Lyra, leading from the front, moved through the chaos with purpose. The battles were fierce, but the resistance fighters fought with the ferocity of those who knew they had everything to lose. The UC, caught off guard by the intensity and precision of the attacks, struggled to regain control. As dawn broke over the city, the scale of the resistance's success became clear. The UC's command structure was in disarray, and Operation Purge had been significantly delayed. The resistance had not only survived, but had dealt a significant blow to their oppressors. Back at their base, Adrian and Lyra gathered with their team, the atmosphere charged with a mix of relief and determination. They had bought themselves time, but they knew the fight was far from over. "Marcus's information saved us," Lyra said, her voice filled with gratitude and resolve. "But we need to keep the pressure on. The UC will regroup, and we need to be ready." Adrian nodded, his eyes reflecting the same determination. "We've shown them that we can fight back. Now, we need to plan our next move. We can't just defend, we need to take the fight to them." In the days that followed, the free minds used the breathing room they had gained to regroup and strengthen their networks. Marcus continued to feed them valuable information, and the resistance grew bolder. Acts of defiance and sabotage increased, and the people of Nova Terra began to see the UC for what it was, a crumbling regime desperately clinging to power. Adrian and Lyra, though exhausted, remained unwavering in their resolve. They knew the road ahead was still fraught with danger, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. The spark of revolution had become a flame, and it was spreading across Nova Terra. In the shadows of the city, the fight for freedom raged on. The UC's control was formidable, but the human spirit was resilient. Adrian, Lyra, and the free minds were ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would reclaim their city and their lives, one step at a time. The resistance had gained crucial time and momentum thanks to Marcus Vallen's information. The UC, though shaken by the coordinated strikes, began to regroup and fortify their remaining strongholds. Adrian, Lyra, and the free minds knew that a decisive strike was necessary to finally tip the balance in their favor. Adrian and Lyra gathered their core team in the hidden bunker, the atmosphere charged with determination. Maps and intelligence reports covered the table as they planned their most ambitious operation yet, a full-scale assault on the UC's Central Command to dismantle their control once and for all. "Our target is the Citadel," Lyra said, pointing to the heavily fortified structure at the heart of Nova Terra. "It's the last bastion of UC's power. If we can take it down, we can cripple their operations and free the city." Adrian nodded. "We'll need to coordinate with all our cells and strike simultaneously. The Citadel's defenses are formidable, but with Marcus's help, we've identified several weak points." Marcus, who had risked everything to support the resistance, stepped forward. "I've managed to smuggle in some disruptor devices that can disable their security systems temporarily. You'll need to act quickly once they're down." The plan was set in motion. Resistance cells across the city prepared for the assault, gathering weapons, making final plans, and saying their goodbyes. The sense of purpose and camaraderie was palpable. Everyone knew the stakes and the potential cost. The night of the operation, Nova Terra was eerily quiet. The resistance fighters moved through the shadows, their hearts pounding with anticipation. As they approached the Citadel, Adrian and Lyra led the main assault team, while other groups positioned themselves around the city to launch simultaneous attacks. Adrian checked his watch. "On my mark," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "3, 2, 1, now." The disruptor devices were activated, and the Citadel's security systems flickered and went dark. The resistance fighters moved in swiftly, breaching the outer defenses and engaging UC enforcers in fierce combat. The sound of gunfire and explosions filled the air as the battle for Nova Terra began in earnest. Inside the Citadel, Adrian and Lyra fought their way through the labyrinthine corridors, their movements precise and coordinated. They encountered heavy resistance, but their determination and the element of surprise gave them the upper hand. Marcus's intelligence proved invaluable, guiding them through hidden passages and past fortified checkpoints. As they neared the central command chamber, the scale of the battle became clear. The resistance had managed to breach several key points, and the UC's forces were spread thin, struggling to maintain control. The Citadel, once a symbol of unassailable power, was now a battlefield. In the command chamber, Overseer Cassius's successor, a ruthless officer named Victor Reese, directed the UC's defense. His expression was a mask of controlled fury as he barked orders and monitored the battle through a series of holoscreens. "Keep them back," Reese shouted. "We cannot let them take the Citadel." Adrian and Lyra burst into the chamber, weapons drawn. The room fell silent as the two sides faced off. Reese's eyes narrowed as he recognized them. "So you're the ones causing all this trouble," Reese said, his voice cold and contemptuous. "You think you can defeat us? You're nothing but a nuisance." Lyra stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "We're more than that, Reese. We're the future. And your time is up." The battle was intense and brutal. Reese fought with the desperation of someone who knew his power was slipping away, but Adrian and Lyra's teamwork and resolve were unmatched. As the fight reached its climax, Adrian managed to disarm Reese, and Lyra delivered the final blow, knocking him unconscious. With Reese defeated, they turned their attention to the command console. Adrian quickly began to disable the remaining defenses and transmit a signal to the resistance fighters outside, indicating their success. "All units, the citadel is ours," Adrian said over the comms. "Push forward and secure the area." The resistance fighters, invigorated by the news, redoubled their efforts. The UC's remaining forces, now leaderless and demoralized, began to falter. One by one, their strongholds fell, and the citizens of Novaterra rose up, joining the fight to reclaim their city. As dawn broke over the city, the battle for Novaterra reached its conclusion. The citadel, once a symbol of the UC's oppressive power, now stood as a testament to the resilience and determination of the human spirit. Adrian and Lyra, standing amidst the ruins of the command chamber, shared a moment of quiet triumph. They had fought long and hard, and now, the city was on the brink of liberation. "It's over," Lyra said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and awe. "We did it." Adrian nodded, a smile breaking across his face. "We did. But the work isn't finished. We need to rebuild, to ensure this never happens again." In the days that followed, the people of Novaterra began the arduous process of rebuilding their city. The Free Minds, now leaders in the new order, worked tirelessly to restore justice and democracy. Marcus Vallon, hailed as a hero, helped guide the transition, using his knowledge and connections to dismantle the remnants of the UC's control. Adrian and Lyra, though exhausted, remained at the forefront of the efforts. Their bond, forged in the crucible of their struggle, was stronger than ever. Together, they envisioned a future free from oppression, where the spirit of resistance and hope would always prevail. In the shadows of Novaterra, the fight for freedom had raged and ultimately triumphed. The UC's control had been formidable, but the human spirit proved resilient and unbreakable. Adrian, Lyra, and the Free Minds had reclaimed their city and their lives, one step at a time. Months had passed since the fall of the UC, and Novaterra was slowly healing. The scars of the battle remained, but so did the spirit of resilience and hope. The city, once a symbol of oppression, was now a beacon of freedom and democracy. Adrian and Lyra stood together on a balcony overlooking the bustling streets below. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and life, a stark contrast to the days of the UC's rule. "We've come a long way," Adrian said, his voice filled with pride and gratitude. Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the same emotions. "We have. And there's still so much to do. But we'll face it together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Adrian and Lyra shared a moment of quiet reflection. They had fought for their city, their people, and their future. And now, they stood on the threshold of a new era, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The story of Echoes of Control was one of resistance, hope, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of freedom could shine bright. And as the people of Novaterra looked to the future, they knew that the fight for freedom was always worth fighting. If you enjoyed this thrilling adventure, we have another exciting tale waiting for you. Click the video on your screen now to watch our latest sci-fi story, filled with even more twists, action, and mind-bending concepts. Don't miss out on your next great adventure. Subscribe to Sci-Fi Story Vault for more captivating stories. Your journey into the future begins now.